Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I apologize for the long delay. I was hoping to be back Tuesday, and I was also hoping to have a whole bunch of exciting stuff for you regarding the Labor Day conference with Dr. Randy White, as well as some interviews and a new video of defending the faith. Long story short, none of that came to fruition. On Friday evening, I made it up to Branson, and we were in the conference room. I was able to see many of you, probably those of you that are going to join us today, hopefully. If you can see that we are going live now after our technical difficulties, I do apologize for that. But I got to see many of you, visit with you for ever so briefly, and then I got a terrible, terrible phone call from my family that my grandpa on my mom's side passed away. And so I had to say bye to everybody. I got to shake Dr. White's hand, and then I got on the road and headed back to Rattan, where my family is. And so I do apologize for the lack of updates, and I know that we may not have as many people tuned in today just because it's been so crazy. I haven't been able to get emails out. I wanted to get emails out to everybody. With that all being said, the title of today's show is We Need Grandpas. I'm not going to be focusing on mine personally. He was a great man, and he's going to be greatly missed. But I want to talk about the principle that we need to have grandparents, that children need to know them, they need to have a relationship with them. And if you are somebody so as unfortunate to not really know your grandparents, maybe they passed before you were born, the principle of having a relationship with a person of another generation, a generation that is removed from your parents, an older generation, that is so crucial to our society, and maybe one of the reasons why we are seeing the movement away from a respect for the traditions of the past, a respect for the wisdom of the past, and the ever progressing movement to continually reshape, reform the principles of our society. I want to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a terrible school shooting that took place in Georgia. Normally, this would be Theology Thursday, where I would just be taking your Bible questions. But because I just now got back to you and we are trying to get caught up on the week just with all the different stuff that went on, what we're going to do is we're going to push our theology question and answer to tomorrow. So Friday will be, it'll be Theology Friday, so where I will just be taking all of your theology questions. So I want to talk about this idea of grandpas, and of course this extends to grandmothers as well. Our culture has shifted in some pretty dramatic ways. And I really kind of see one of two. There used to be a much stronger sense of family units. You would not typically have a child grow up, get married, start a family, and then move extremely far away from both sets of grandparents. And therefore, you would live in close proximity to at least one, if not both. And so, your spouse has parents, you have parents, those are the grandparents of your children. And you would live close by with some of them, if not both of them. And what this meant is that your children experienced a close relationship with your parents and your spouse's parents. And I think that is of great benefit, of extreme importance, because growing up with a strong relationship with the former generation that came before your parents is going to be of great benefit to you as a person and in a number of ways, as far as emotional support, but also wisdom that is gained. Now, there is the running joke that the woman that raised you, right, or the man that raised you, is not the same person when they become a grandparent. Because beforehand, when they were really strict and made sure that you didn't touch the brass on your father's uniform, well, when you have kids, for whatever reason, the grandkids got permission to smudge the brass just a little bit, and your grandpa didn't mind polishing it back up before he went to work. So you did get to have the benefit of having 4 people in your life who were just able to enjoy you. They didn't have to worry about raising you. They were just able to enjoy their role as grandparents, as grandpa, as grandma, and to have somebody loving you unconditionally in that way, and also just getting to be a source of joy and fun is just a great, great blessing. It's a blessing to them, right? Because it's kind of the reward to not strangling your kids when they were teenagers. And it's also a blessing to the kids because they could get to look forward to. I get to go to grandma and grandpa's house and all the fun that would entail. Now, also, though, it gave you insight into that older generation. One of the classic pictures of a grandparent or grandpa is the stories that they would tell. These stories could range from when they were a little boy to all the way up till 5 years before you were born, or when you couldn't even remember things. And what it did is it gave you an idea of what life was like. My grandpa on my dad's side, he was a little bit older than the grandpa on my mom's side, and it's amazing how the difference was that those 5 years made. I'll remind you, in the early 1900s, mid-1900s, that was when technology was dramatically changing at a fast rate. If you think technology is changing at a fast rate now, there is some truth to that, but I don't think it's the same. If you compare what it was like back to the early 1940s, 1950s, my grandpa on my dad's side, he can recall riding a horse and buggy to school. Now, I'm not saying my grandpa on my mom's side didn't, but his stories didn't really focus or entail a lot of that. You can just see the dramatic shift there. Now, that's fascinating. That a difference of 5 years, you notice some of the differences in the stories, but you get to see how times changed. And my grandpa on my mom's side, one of the things that he was able to recall, because the great benefit is I have multiple accounts where the grandpa on my dad's side was, to a degree, not maybe quite as involved directly with the community of Rattan. Not saying that he wasn't, but it was more so as he got older, because he actually went to school in another location. He didn't go to school at Rattan. There was a smaller schoolhouse that he went to. But my grandpa on my mom's side, he was almost immediately involved in that area. So he was able to recall a whole lot of facts and details about the town. Maybe knew more than anybody I ever met. And it was just fascinating to get those stories and to get that aspect of how things changed. One of the things that I discovered listening to both stories of my grandparents, whether it was my dad's dad or my mother's dad, is that the town that I grew up in, Rattan, was actually more of a happening business town when they were kids, when they were young men, as compared to when I was a young man. And that's due to the way people travel. Nowadays, it's nothing for people to hop in their car and drive 40 minutes on a really nice highway to go to Paris, Texas, and go out and eat at a restaurant or go to the Walmart, you name it. It was nothing for them, or it's nothing for them today. But back in the day, there were not as good of roads. They couldn't travel as fast. The speed limit was fast. The vehicles couldn't travel as fast. My dad's dad remembers when Highway 93 was just nothing but basically a wagon trail with grass growing in the middle between the two ruts. And so guess what? If you were going to live in a town, that town needed to have a grocery store and it needed businesses. And so Rattan had a sawmill. And I remember my Papa Jimmy talking about a sawmill gravy that people ate back in the day. I guess there was gravy that they'd make at the sawmill. So there you go. But there was a sawmill in Rattan and there were businesses all around it. And it's amazing to see now when I drive through my old town, some of the buildings have been tore down, some of them have been remodeled, but all those places used to have businesses and there were grocery stores and people could get basically all the provisions that they needed essentially from that town. And to see how with the rise of the internet, Amazon being able to order things and have them delivered to you, what that did to small businesses. And now it's amazing. If you go to the town that I grew up in, the different types of jobs that people have is not near as vast because you just can't do it. Used to, you could live in a small town like that and you could be somebody who worked in a grocery store. You could own a grocery store, or you could operate a sawmill, timber company, you name it. But now these bigger businesses are opening up franchises in different locations. So now there's a Dollar General at Rattan as opposed to just a locally owned store. You also got an idea of what people were like back then. The world was a lot smaller place because you didn't have access to all of the internet. Now, I know that almost runs contrary. In some ways, you would think, well, no, isn't the world smaller now because we can just, I'm talking to you right now, live streaming. You can hear me. This is something out of Star Trek that you can see me and hear me, and we're not anywhere close to each other. In that sense, yes, the world is smaller because we can speak and we can traverse across these vast distances with the invention of the internet. But when it comes to knowing people, my grandpas knew almost everybody in that town. Almost everybody. I would hear them telling me stories, and they knew all the people in that area. They knew their fathers, they knew their kids. They probably could even recognize their cattle. Now, if you go to the town of Rattan, I don't know if anybody knows everybody because there's more people moving in, but also people are more isolated. Because guess what? Used to, you would go to the grocery store and you would see people and you would interact with them. Now, yes, some go to Dollar General, but also you can drive to Antlers to go to Pruitt's. You could drive to Hugo to go to Walmart. You could go to Paris to go to Walmart. Maybe even some people who live a little bit further to the east take the time to go to Broken Bow. Excuse me. With that being said, we don't know each other. Used to, everybody had kids. Everybody had kids. And you know what that meant? It meant that you were all involved, typically with the local school, because parents had to work and homeschooling wasn't near as common. So everybody's kid went to the public school. So you knew each other that way. Nowadays, not everybody has kids. We have people in their late 20s, early 30s, and they don't have children. So they're not going to school events. They don't have any investment in it. As a matter of fact, nowadays, school districts can't even get bonds passed to build a building when the old building that they have is leaking and probably is not even passing the health and safety standards because a person in a wheelchair can't access the bathroom. But these people in the community no longer have any involvement in it, so therefore they're not going to really care and be invested in the public events. It's amazing to see how small the world was back then when everybody knew everybody. I'm not saying that everything was perfect. I'm not trying to paint an unrealistic picture and that every small town was Mayberry, but I could just simply tell by the way that my grandparents talked, my grandpas, that they knew the people in the area. I don't really know the people hardly anymore. that was from my hometown. And now, where I live now, you know who I see during the course of the day? If I'm not going to church or going to visit somebody, I see my kids and I see my cows. That's about it. Well, my father-in-law's cows. And that's it. I don't get out and interact with people hardly anymore. And if I do, I go to town, and Durant is such a big area that I don't even recognize hardly anybody. Very rarely do I see somebody that I know. The world has just gotten a whole lot bigger in that sense. We don't know everybody anymore. Also, having grandparents gives you insight onto how good we have it today in a lot of ways. Even my dad would tell this story, but the idea of having a heat and air system in your house was just unheard of. In the summertime, you open the windows. In the wintertime, you used extra blankets. It really is quite different than what we have today. My grandpa on my dad's side told the story when he was a boy. His dad borrowed a truck to haul. I guess it was a bunch of wood that they had chopped in order to make enough money to pay for Christmas. And the Christmases that they would get some nuts and an orange in a sock, and that was Christmas for the most part. The idea of just getting a ton of toys. I remember building forts out of my presents. I would literally sit on the floor before we opened them, and I would stack them up and build a wall with the presents that I got. My grandparents, that concept would be completely foreign to them today, or foreign to them back then compared to what we have today. We live in an era of plenty, of abundance, of more than we need. When I was a kid, I would have to try to think about, well, what did I even get for Christmas last year? My grandpa on my dad's side remembered a particular toy he got that was a donkey that pulled a wagon, and you could press a button, and I guess it was a spring or something, and the donkey could stand up, and then you press it back down. That was a toy that he got. I wouldn't even consider that a toy when I was a kid. I would consider that some kind of decoration. And yet, my grandpa also never learned to ride a bicycle because they never could afford one. He even tried to get enough scraps to build one time, and he couldn't do it. And yet, by the time I was 12 years old, I had probably owned 4 different bicycles. Because now you can buy one for little kids and a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. It's unfathomable. And my children, the idea of Saturday morning cartoons was foreign to me. I could watch cartoons anytime I wanted. For them, it's not even the idea of watching cartoons, but they get to pick whatever they want. I grew up in the day when you could watch movies or you could watch whatever cartoon was playing on TV at that time. That was your options. You didn't get to pick which cartoon you wanted. Now our kids these days, they get to pick what they want to watch. To a degree. I try to, make them watch good stuff, but the idea of not having a choice is completely foreign to them, just as the idea of only Saturday morning cartoons was completely foreign to me. My dad's dad did not see a TV until he was 19 years old, when he was riding on a bus somewhere in Texas. I think he was 19, it was how old he was. But let's compare to what today looks like now. Nowadays, we have children who have terrible relationships with their parents often, so they don't even like to be around them. That's a foreign idea to me. My parents love their grandparents, or love my grandparents, their parents. They love spending time with them. And yet, for many though, there's strife. So they don't have family get-togethers very often. Maybe Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas. It wasn't that way for me. I would see my parents or my grandparents every week, sometimes multiple times a week, even multiple times a day sometimes. But so many today have disjointed relationships. They don't enjoy spending time with their parents. So guess what? Because they don't spend time with their parents, their kids don't get time with their grandparents. Also, here's another problem. So many people today, due to bad choices, maybe bad spouses, bad life decisions, and maybe just a lack of responsibility, they are not raising their own kids. They're not being the parents they should be. And guess what happens? The responsibility of raising the children fall on the grandparents. So now, where you should have gotten to enjoy being a grandparent, spoiling them a little bit, being a little bit, laxed and letting them do the fun things that grandparents let kids do, have cookies when they're not supposed to have cookies, or taking them out for ice cream just for the sake of taking them out for ice cream, spoiling them because that's your job. Now you have to play parent all over again. So you don't get to enjoy the benefits of not strangling your teenagers. Now you've got to raise a teenager all over again, and now you're older and tired, and you don't want to have to do it anymore. You've already done your job. So many would-be grandparents today, the child may call them grandpa, but really he has to be their dad. And a substitute dad is not really a dad at all. Now, unfortunately, also, our life expectancy is going down, believe it or not. There was a time when I was in college. I had to take a psych class. And the class I took was Psychology of Aging. Kind of a silly class. The professor, I don't know if she was actually a professor, but she was the instructor. Big lib. But anyways, of course, because it was college and psychology. We had to read a book that If I Live to Be 100, I think that was the title of the book. I didn't ever read it, I don't think. But the author and the studies at the time for that class was projecting my generation. I'm a millennial. Projecting our generation to be centenarians, living to be 100 years old, at least. That was the prediction, that we were anticipated to live that long. That is not the case now. Our life expectancy is going downward. Our generation is no longer projected to be centenarians. In the span of, I would have been 22 then, I think, 22 years old, because I was already engaged to my wife. So 7 years, not quite 7 years. We went from expecting to be centenarians to now the average life expectancy for a man is something like 76 years old. My grandpa passed away. He was going to turn 81 2 days ago, would have been his birthday. He'd have been 81 years old. He lived 4 years, almost 5 years past the life expectancy. I don't know. I see when it says life expectancy down. The causes of it. Is it our food? Are we eating bad food? Is it all of the different medications? Is it all the vaccinations they make us take nowadays? There's all sorts of speculation. I will tell you this. I think it's our mental status. We have, in our country, a terrible outlook on life because we are told work, retire, and then you should just enjoy your retirement and go and do whatever you want. And so many people, when they retire, they don't know what to do with their lives because they're no longer working, so they get depressed. Or they try to live out their fantasy life, traveling and going and doing, and never build a relationship with their grandkids and never actually have a strong role as grandparents. And so eventually they get to the point where they're empty in their existence because they don't actually have any deeper bonds than just seeing their kid, their kids and their grandkids a few times a year. That is going to lead to depression because it doesn't matter how much money you have. Money is never going to mean anything of any great significance in life. But also it could be our terrible eating habits, people not exercising and getting outside and doing stuff. So all that can be baked into the cake as well. But people aren't living as long. So if you consider that and then combine the fact that people are waiting to have children. Used to, you were expected to start having kids when you were in your early 20s. And biologically, this is absolutely true. Women are most fertile in their early 20s or even later teens. Because if we're being honest, once upon a time, going back to the early 1900s, women were getting married at 16 and having babies at 17 and 18. Nowadays, that would be crazy thoughts, right? How could we do that? Getting married so young. People have been discouraged. I think maybe we should consider not discouraging getting married young. Truth is, if you look at a lot of data, it's not the people that are getting married young that are often as prone to divorce. It's many times people that get married later on in life that are more prone to divorce, later 20s, early 30s even. Those are interesting stats to consider. But if you consider that, people get married early or mid to late 20s, and they wait till their late 20s to early 30s to have kids. All right, let's say that you are 31 years old when you have a kid. You have your first child. Now let's say that that child has a child at 31. You are 62 years old when you become a grandparent. 62 years old. Then, let's say that you live to be the life expectancy of 76. You're a man, grandpa. You pass away at 76. That is 15 years. Your oldest grandchild will be 15 years old when you pass. You do not come to fully appreciate your parents or your grandparents, either one, probably until you start getting into you'll have strong bonds with them and you'll love them at a young age. But to really grasp the significance of them and their wisdom that they have, I mean, goodness gracious, I'm 29, and when you're early 20s, you still think you know everything to a degree. It wasn't until I got to my later early 20s, 20, 23, 24, until I, realized, what, my parents were right about most things in life. If you lose your grandparents at 15, and you never know any into your 20s, or at least your later teens, how are you ever going to fully appreciate them and learn from them? You're not fully developed yet. Your brain's not fully developed till you get to your mid-20s. If we consider, though, let's say the average age is 25. 25 years old, you have a kid. 25 years old, your kid is 25 years old, so you're 50 when you become a grandparent. 50 years old. And at 50 years old, you live to be, guess what? 76. That's 26 years. Your child will have a kid, and that kid will get to know you until the age of 26. They will have that much more time to learn from you. That is significant. The idea of waiting into your mid-30s to start a family is a terrible idea most of the time. I'm not saying it's sometimes you don't meet the right person. Sometimes you're just in a position in life to where it can't happen. I'm just saying ideally, you should have kids when you're younger. One of the things that, my wife's parents, they were traveling and in medical school, and, they ended up having kids a little bit later. And so one of the reasons why we had kids as young as we did, we were married for 2 years, basically before we had our first one. But we wanted to have children early on so they could enjoy them, because my wife's parents are a little bit older than my parents. And they're very thankful for that. I can't tell you how many times that my father-in-law has voiced how glad he is that we went ahead and had kids, because now he gets to enjoy them, and he's not, going to be 75 years old and his first grandchild is born. But that's not what our society's like today. It's an exception. It's a rare exception. Now, I'm very thankful. My parents are, mid-50s, and they're getting to enjoy their grandkids, and I want them to be healthy. And I think my mom's listening. Mom, be healthy. Dad, be healthy. Lift weights, eat good food. But also just have purpose, live a good long time, because I want my children to learn from you. I've learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from your parents. So I need you. Raising a child, truth is, should not be just a single effort of the mother and father. Ultimately, it's my job to raise my child. But grandparents, I think if we're going to consider God and His infinite wisdom and His design of creation, His order of creation, there's a reason why He allows us to live as long as we do. To give us the lifespan, roughly, give or take, late 70s, 75, 76. If we get back to living life with purpose, maybe even into our 80s and 90s. But there's a reason why He designed it that way, so the grandparents can help. For one, my grandparents watched me before I went to school. They would watch me during the day while my parents worked. Unfortunately, my parents weren't in a position where my mom could be able to stay home, be a keeper of the home. But my grandparents helped raise me, take care of me during the day. The truth is, grandparents, and I hope you're listening, and some of you are going to agree, and some of you may want to recoil a little bit, but the truth is, as grandparents, it's not your job to just go and see the grandkids when you feel like it. You need to have purpose in your life. Grandkids, truth is, are not just playthings for you. Now, I understand, if you live in one location, your kids live way off in another, I fully understand, okay? Sometimes that's just how life is. But if you're within proximity, if you're one town over, even if you're an hour or so drive away, it is partly your responsibility to take care of those kids, to help your children. They need you. The grandparents that are actively involved in caring for their grandkids, watching them, spending time with them, I would be willing to put a lot of money down, live much, much longer than the grandparents that don't. You need to have purpose. I'm very thankful. My grandparents were like that. I recall spending a lot of time at both houses. Maybe my dad's parents a little bit more, just because they were on the way to the grocery store a lot of times. So we'd get dropped off there, and it was kind of easier. But also, though, because my mom's parents were a little bit younger, they were still working some. So sometimes I couldn't always be watched by them because they were in law enforcement too. And so, they would need to be ready to take a call, and you just can't be having grandkids, but then you have to leave at any moment to take a call. But that doesn't mean we didn't spend a lot of time with them, though. You need to do that. You need to spend time with them. So we need grandpas. I tell you time and time again. I'm not perfect. I've got a lot of flaws. I'll tell you that much. But I wouldn't be where I am today without the time that I've had with my grandparents as well. They played a fundamental role in shaping who I am as a person. And I'm so thankful for the time that I had with my grandpas. I now have lost both of them. What great men they were. I love them so much. I'm so thankful that I was able to have such a good relationship with both of them, learn from them. And I know I'm very thankful that they knew the Lord, they understood the gospel. And so I'll get to see them again one day. What great men. I have a grandma left. She's a great woman. I love her. And so I'm definitely going to savor all the time with her as well, because grandmothers are important as well, just as important, and we need them too. But today was a special one, since I wanted to explain the reason why I was missing in action for a while, lacking on my promises, videos and interviews, was because my grandpa, Jimmy, he went on to be with the Lord. And I look forward to seeing him again one day. In the words of the Brad Paisley song, the theology isn't great when I get where I'm going. It talks about spreading my wings and flying and everything. But he does say one thing. And I think it's a good picture of the new heavens and new earth and the resurrection. I'm going to walk with my granddaddy, and he'll match me step for step. And I'll tell him how much I missed him every minute since he left. So with that, we need grandpas. Love you, Papa Jimmy. Now, I want to talk about a shooting that took place at a school in Georgia. Now, the truth is, I don't have a lot of details right now, but I don't know if everybody does either. It amazes me when these things take place. So many people are quick to come out with all these statements, all these comments. I think that we need to pause for a moment. Whenever we hear these tragedies that take place, we've got to stop and we got to say, wait a minute. Let's hold on. Let's grieve. Let's mourn those that are lost. But let's wait to hear the details before we make any quick decisions. So, with that being said, I'm going to say what we do know. And I'm going to be, this is CNN.com right here, and I'll use CNN sometimes because they're the most, how do I put it? They're the most liberal, or left wing, so you're going to get an idea. But what we do know is that there were 2 14-year-old students and 2 teachers that were killed. I don't know if we know the identity of the victims yet, but that's what we know. What happened is yesterday in Appalachia High School in Georgia, a 14-year-old student is the suspect. What happened at the school, they were in session, and this 14-year-old comes into the school, we do believe, with like an AR-15 rifle. And that's about what I know. Killing 2 children, killing 2 teachers, and then I believe there's about 8 others wounded. Now, CNN initially posted something like 30 wounded. Seems to be the case. I'm not going to give you the name of them. I don't think that's good. I think they want to get their name in the newspaper. They want to get their photos, so I'm not going to give you their name or anything. With that being said, what else am I going to say to that? That's about what we have. So, number one, as we always do, we're going to make this a political event. We're going to politicize all of this. The liberals are already in motion, spinning up our narrative. We've got to ban guns. We got to ban guns because if AR-15s did not exist, this wouldn't have happened. That's their theory. I want to address that one first and foremost. Taking advantage of any event in which people have died for political purposes is showing your priorities are wrong. And so this is probably true for, well, this is true for whatever side of the aisle that you're on, I would say. Not that I don't know that the conservatives necessarily do that, because it's rare that there's an event that takes place in which people lose their lives that we use it for some kind of political statement. But they do this all the time when it comes to shootings, the liberal media, the left wing. And therefore, it's really ugly to do that, to take advantage of the opportunity instead of mourning the loss of lives. And at this time, what do they always do? Somebody do something. They will put a parent who has just lost their child on TV, and they will be saying, somebody do something. We've got to stop it. Now, what this implies is we are going to ban AR-15s or other rifles, or you name it. Ban firearms. We need gun control. Common sense gun laws. An important rule is never make a decision on a Monday. I learned this from many people. You never make a decision on a Monday. Mondays are when morale is low. You are starting a new week. You got to go back to work. There's bills to pay. The weekend's over and you're feeling down. Don't make rash decisions on a Monday. In the wake of a tragedy like this, you don't need to make rash, quick decisions. We have to think about this in a very logical way. And when there's a tragedy that's taken place, it is hard to be logical. Because instead of allowing our logic, our reasoning, to dictate our decisions, it is very easy to allow your emotions to make your decisions. That's why it's not good to let teenagers decide things for themselves, because teenagers are so emotionally driven, not logical or reason driven, okay? All right, I know the boy is he's not well behaved, Daddy, but I can fix him, or whatever, right? That's teenage girl emotions right there. It's not logic. It's not reason. In the times of these events, if our gut instinct reaction is ban all the guns so these can't happen again, there's going to be several things happen. If somebody wants to do something bad, they will. There's a lot of bad things that happen in other places that don't get reported. They don't get near as much attention. I'll remind you, there was a shooting. There's been shootings in Europe this year. There have been a lot of stabbings this year in Europe that are never reported. They don't get the headlines. They're not as dramatic as shootings are. We have to remember the purpose of that Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Keep that in mind. Necessary to the security of a free state. The idea of a free state is there is not a tyrannical, authoritarian government able to force you to heed to its will. So for a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment is not about home defense. It's not about that. Let's leave hunting aside and the silly argument that Joe Biden gives about you don't see deer wearing bulletproof vests. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with home defense, concealed carry, protecting your family. That's not the purpose of the Second Amendment. You know why? Because the idea of protecting your home and family should be so common sense that you don't need an argument for it. You don't need a law for it. It's clear, it's obvious. It's self-evident. Of course, a father should have the means to protect his family. What is necessary to address, though, is the right of the people to bear arms for the defense of the free state. The Second Amendment is all about being able to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. That is the point of the Second Amendment. And therefore, to do so, you need to have access to whatever firearms that the federal government can wield against you. That is correct. I said it. Ronald Reagan, one of his greatest mistakes was allowing the machine gun ban in the 1980s. A machine gun is a firearm that is used by the military and therefore applies to the Second Amendment. There was not a limit on the Second Amendment. Joe Biden has falsely said, time and again, you could not own a cannon. You absolutely could own a cannon. You should be able to own whatever weapon that the military has. There will always be somebody who wants to escalate it and say, okay, so you think that private civilians can own a fighter jet? As if private civilians can easily purchase I don't know, however many millions of dollars fighter jet just like that. But yes, if possible, if you can afford it, because the Second Amendment is about the security of a free state. Are we willing to give up our ability to defend ourselves as a free state, to secure individual liberty, so that nobody could access a gun and shoot children in a school? Do you think that we should sacrifice liberty for safety? Now, that's number one. Number two, the argument is somebody do something, and the argument is only on the gun side. I will say this until I am blue in the face. Gun-free zones, whether they are in schools, churches, shopping malls, or government buildings, yes, government buildings, is the single most, and I don't use this word, I don't use it often on the show, but it's the single most stupid idea. It is a stupid idea. You are inviting somebody to do bad things. You are telling evil people, you will not meet resistance if you try to kill people here. If you are a school and you have a no-gun sign on your window, take it down. Take it down. I don't care what the federal law says, or I guess the state laws. You've got to change it. You've got to stop it. Have legislators take those signs down to remove those policies. Because as long as schools are a zone of saying that we do not have any means of protecting our students, more students are going to die. Plain and simple. There's no reason why you cannot have armed personnel on site. You say, we can't afford an officer. Are you sure? You really can't? Your county or your local police department can't afford to have one officer at least on duty at the school? All right, then, we can arm teachers. And they say, oh, that's crazy. You can't do that. You can't arm teachers. I'm not saying that every teacher is capable, but I think there are some. Maybe the baseball coach, football coach. There's got to be somebody at that school that's able to do so, able to do the job. And if not, you need to train them. I would say this, and I've said it before. If AR-15s were banned, you should still have safety officers at the school carrying firearms or armed teachers. You should still have it. Because guess what? Somebody can do just as much damage with a baseball bat. That is extremely horrible and terrible, but it's true. A person could do just as much harm if they wanted to, but they don't, because it would not get on the headlines. It gets on the headlines because they used a firearm. That's the plain, simple reason. So we can throw our hands in the air and scream and cry, somebody do something. But as long as we are allowing schools to be a helpless victim zone, we're going to continue to get exactly what we're asking for. There are some schools that have enacted it. The school that I went to, the administration there is a massive sign out front saying that there are staff that are armed and willing and ready to protect students, and there are. And I know some of them personally, and I know that they train. Every school needs to have that policy. Every school needs to be ready to defend our students. We're going to see as more unfolds on this, but that's my thoughts, and that's the truth. So schools need to start doing it. And my children are not going to go to a school unless they have that sign and they have people carrying. I will homeschool my kids indefinitely if there's not a school nearby that will have the proper measures to protect them. If you're a parent and you have children that go to school, you absolutely have to make sure they're doing their due diligence. You should be calling up the local school board right now. I did the same thing at Uvalde. When Uvalde took place, I wasn't at Uvalde, but when Uvalde took place, I immediately called the local school board that I was working at the time, that school district, made demands, told them that we got to get the sign down, and as far as I know, not a thing has changed. And that's on the school board. It's on the administration. You've got to do your job. You got to protect the kids, no matter what. So that's my thoughts on that. Banning guns is never going to be the answer. We will not sacrifice liberty for the sake of somehow perceived safety. Because the truth be told, if you banned every firearm in the world, people would still do something bad. Furthermore, I'll remind you, there was a shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. And it took place back in 2018, I believe. Yes. 10 people were killed at the shooting in Santa Fe. 10 people. You forgot about it, probably. And that's because the media buried it. They're not really concerned about this shooting. It's not really important to them. Didn't make a whole lot of headlines for very long. They quickly just completely abandoned it. You know why? Because the shooter used a shotgun and I believe revolvers. A shotgun and revolvers. 10 children were killed. More than what were killed in Georgia. But because he wasn't using an AR-15, the media buried the story. They buried it. They didn't care. It's all about the narrative. Do not underestimate the power of the media to control the narrative. I know it's been a different show today. I haven't really talked a lot about theology, but tomorrow will be Theology Friday. So I want your questions. Submit them to me. I'll answer them. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Great to have you back. I'll read a comment from Robert. Robert says, growing up in the 40s and 50s, many of the elders in my life were from the 1800s. My grandpa was born in the middle of the Civil War. I never got to know him. Oh, could you imagine the stories that he would have to tell? I think that would be an amazing person to get to talk to. Hopefully you will get to sit down with him one day. All right, well, we are back in action now. We're going to be doing our normal live streams, and we'll get back to our content, our sermons, our daily show, because this is Shields and Arrows. This is Baze Ministries. We defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. We're not going anywhere. We're going to take the wisdom from the ages handed down from our grandpas, and we're going to stand for truth, justice, the American way, and rightly dividing the word of truth. Thank you all so much. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a good one.